Hello everyone, I'm Mike, and welcome to Sci-Fi Travelers. Today's story begins in a city where nothing can remain hidden. Imagine walls that glow when you lie, doors that only open with the right note, a civilization that sings instead of speaks, and in the midst of all this, a very ordinary person who can barely sing. He's come to give a speech and shake hands. Instead, what he's given, like a medal at a grand ceremony, is a woman. An award, and every instinct he possesses says no. If you're ready, let's begin. Enjoy the show. I froze when I heard my prize, an alien vampire woman. The thing nobody tells you about diplomacy is how much of it is standing very still while hoping you haven't already caused an incident. Theodore had been on the planet for 11 hours and had, by his own conservative estimate, caused 4. 2 were arguable. 1 involved a fountain that turned out not to be a fountain. The last, he preferred not to think about, because thinking about it made his ears go hot, and in Echova, a person's feelings had a distressing tendency to become visible to everyone in the room. That was the trouble with a city carved entirely out of sound. Echova sprawled through the belly of a mountain like something that had been poured rather than built, all coal-black stone threaded with glowing veins of pale gold. And those veins responded to everything. Footsteps, voices, moods, apparently, which nobody had warned him about until he'd felt embarrassed near a wall and watched it blush along with him. Doors here weren't opened with hands. They were opened with tone. The right note sung into the right archway, and the stone would part like it had been waiting all day for someone to finally ask nicely. Theodore had spent his first morning producing a series of sounds that opened absolutely nothing, and eventually coaxed ajar what he'd assumed was the embassy antechamber, and turned out to be a closet full of what he sincerely hoped were ceremonial brooms. You meant to do that, he'd told the broom closet, with as much authority as he could manage. This was the core technique of interstellar diplomacy, in his experience. 90% of it was pretending you had meant to do the thing you had very much not meant to do, delivered with a straight enough face that everyone agreed to believe you. Now he stood in the Hall of Honors, which was less a hall than a cathedral hollowed out of the dark, and he was doing the still-standing hoping thing with his entire body. Around him the echo vans sat in tiers that rose into shadow, and they were, he had to admit, magnificent. Tall and grave and luminous-eyed, their skin faintly traced with the same glowing lines that ran through the walls, so that a crowd of them looked like a constellation that had come indoors to get out of the weather. They did not speak. They sang. Every word of the ceremony arrived as melody, layered and overlapping, a language where meaning lived in pitch and interval, and the precise shiver of a held note. Theodore's translator implant rendered it into words a half-second late, which meant he experienced the entire event as a beautiful piece of music being gently mocked by subtitles. He'd been briefed. He wanted that on the record, wherever the record was kept. He had been briefed for 6 weeks. He had learned to hum the 7 courtesy tones, 3 of which he could produce reliably, and 1 of which, if he wasn't careful, came out sounding like a question he hadn't intended to ask. He had studied the customs. He knew that the honors ceremony was the highest expression of Echovan regard, that gifts were sung into being, that to be given something in this hall was to be woven for a moment into the city's own long song. What he had not been briefed on, what he was beginning to suspect no one had thought to mention, because to an Echovan it was as obvious as gravity, was what the gifts might actually be. The honors came one at a time. A traveler from the surface received a length of resonant crystal that hummed when you breathed on it. A returning elder was sung a new name, the whole hall lifting it up like a lantern. Theodore clapped, then stopped clapping when he realized no one else was, then started again more quietly, then abandoned the project entirely and folded his hands in a way he hoped read as dignified, rather than as a man hiding evidence. The veins in the floor pulsed faintly beneath his boots each time, keeping time with a heartbeat that wasn't his. Then the singing changed. It dropped. Not in volume, in depth, sliding down into a register he felt in his sternum more than heard, a tone so low the glowing lines seemed to lean inward to listen. The tears went still. The overlapping voices thinned to a single thread. and the thread was reaching unmistakably toward him. His translator hesitated, stuttered, and then offered in the flat, helpful voice of a machine that did not understand what it was about to ruin. The highest honor, given to the envoy of Earth. In recognition. In recognition of what, it did not say. Theodore stood very still and did the hoping. Every luminous vein in the hall began, slowly, to glow toward him, light gathering along the black stone in bright converging rivers, as though the whole city had turned to point. And out of the shadow at the base of the tiers where the darkness pooled thickest, something moved that the darkness did not want to give up. She stepped into the gold light without hurrying, and the light seemed almost shy of her. Pale, pale beyond pale, pale the way the deepest part of a cave is cold, a whiteness that made the glowing walls look warm and ordinary by comparison. Dark hair, darker eyes, eyes that held the black better than the caverns did, that did not glitter or reflect but simply kept the dark, the way a well keeps water. She wore the stillness of someone who had done this before. She looked at Theodore across the shining hall with an expression he couldn't read and would spend a long time trying to. The song resolved. The translator, gentle as a dropped plate, finished the sentence. Your award. The hall waited, luminous, for him to be delighted. Somewhere in the tiers a soft note lifted, the Echova equivalent of polite applause, inviting him to join it. Theodore looked at the woman who had been announced as a thing he now owned and understood, with the slow, cold clarity of a man watching a fountain reveal itself to be something else entirely. That clapping would be the single worst thing he could possibly do. So he did not clap. He stood there with his hands frozen halfway to each other, and in the great glowing dark of Echova, where every hidden thing eventually made a sound, the first thing he made was silence. In Echova, refusing a gift isn't rudeness, it's almost an act of vandalism. You can't just say no. The word exists only as a note, not a spoken word, and the note Theodore is about to reach for isn't one he can sing. So he does the human thing. He opens his mouth in a room where emotions gleam on the walls and tries to give a woman back to him in a language built to hold her. But what about Scarlett? She's been given before. What she's never seen before is someone trying to give her back. The walls are just beginning to gleam. No, Theodore said. It came out in standard, in plain, flat human speech, and it landed in the singing hall like a stone dropped into a still pool. He heard it hit. He felt it hit. The veins in the walls flinched, the light stuttering along the black stone as though the whole city had touched something cold. 10,000 luminous eyes turned toward the envoy of Earth, who had just made a sound that was not music, in a place where making a sound that was not music was roughly equivalent to sneezing on a sacred text. His translator, bless its literal little heart, tried to help. It took his flat human no and rendered it into the nearest Echova tone it could find, which was not the note for refusal, because there wasn't one, refusal being a concept Echova had apparently never needed, but the note for broken, a cracked, descending wail of a sound, the tone you sang when something precious had shattered beyond repair. It rang out over the tiers and hung there, shimmering and awful. So, to be clear about the record, what the assembled dignitaries of Echova heard, in their own beloved language, was the envoy of Earth throwing back his head at the moment of highest honor and howling that everything was ruined. Okay, Theodore said to himself quietly. That's worse. The Master of Honors, a towering Echova whose glowing lines had gone an agitated, flickering amber, sang something rapid and appalled, and the translator raced to keep up. The envoy is displeased. The honor is unworthy. Speak the fault so it may be mended. And beneath the words ran a genuine threat of panic, because in a city where every gift was sung into the collective song, a rejected gift was a wrong note that would echo for years. Theodore lifted both hands, palms out, the universal gesture for, please stop everyone from feeling things at me. The honor isn't unworthy. The honor is. He stopped. How did you say a person is not a thing to a room that had just, with enormous tenderness, given him one? The gift is a person, he tried. You can't give me a person. Where I come from, we have some fairly strong opinions about that. Whole documents, very underlined. The translator sang this. Some of it survived the trip. Judging by the wave of confused, discordant murmuring that rolled through the tiers, most of it did not. And through all of it, the panic, the amber flickering, the great glowing hall churning with a distress it could not hide because it had never learned how. The woman at the center of the light did not move. Scarlett stood in the converging gold and watched him. Not the crowd. Him. Her dark eyes held that same unreadable stillness, but something had shifted behind it. Some small flicker so brief he might have imagined it. A light coming on in a house that had been dark so long you'd assumed no one lived there. She tilted her head. The motion was almost nothing. It was the most interested nothing Theodore had ever seen. The Master of Honors was still singing, something about precedent, about the shame of an unaccepted gift, about how the ceremony could not simply stop when Scarlett finally spoke. She didn't sing it. That was the thing. She used words, actual, spoken, unmelodied words, in standard as flat and plain as his own, and the effect on the hall was electric. The veins went dim with shock. An echo van speaking instead of singing was, he would learn later, a little like a person choosing to communicate exclusively by slamming doors. "You're refusing me," she said. "I'm refusing the premise," Theodore said. "Very different. The premise is terrible. You seem," he gestured helplessly, at all of her, "fine. Better than fine. The premise is the problem. No one has ever refused me before." She said it the way you'd report the weather in a country you no longer lived in. "I have been given 6 times, envoy. Traded, once. I was very young for that one. I don't remember the tune. 6 times I have stood in a hall like this and been the last honor sung. And 6 times someone has taken me and sung the acceptance note and clapped." Her mouth did something that on a warmer face would have been a smile. "You didn't clap." Clapping felt aggressively wrong. It was. She studied him. "I can't decide," she said, "if you are a man of remarkable principle, or if you are simply too stupid to know what you've been handed." "Historically," Theodore said, "it's been a real photo finish between those two. And there, it happened." A sound came out of her that was not a song and not quite a laugh. A short, startled exhale, quickly caught, quickly locked back behind the stillness. But the walls caught it. The nearest vein of gold flared, just once, bright and sudden. A single line of light leaping up the black stone beside her shoulder before she could stop it. Because in Echova, sound revealed every hidden thing. And a laugh she hadn't meant to laugh was a very hidden thing indeed. She glanced at the glowing wall as though it had betrayed her. It had. That was its entire job. The Master of Honors, seizing on the only thread of order left, sang a long, careful resolution. Since the honor could not be accepted and could not be unsung, the gift would be held unresolved, bound to the envoy by protocol until the matter could be properly settled. Which meant, the translator explained with what Theodore chose to interpret as machine sympathy, that the two of them were now stuck with each other. Formally. Until further notice. "So, to summarize," Theodore said as the ceremony collapsed into anxious song around them, "I refuse to accept you, and the punishment for that is that I don't get to leave you alone." "The city has a sense of humor," Scarlett said. "The city and I are going to have words. The city only accepts them in the right key." She looked at him a moment longer, and the flicker behind her eyes had not gone out. "You'll get them wrong," she said. "You get everything wrong." "Give me time," said Theodore. "I've only been ruining this civilization since breakfast." In the next episode, the two actually start talking. And here's a trap Theodore wasn't warned about. The caves in Echova carry everything. Every word travels further than you think. So does every emotion. You can't argue quietly. You can't laugh secretly. And you certainly can't start feeling something for someone because the walls radiate light to be heard all over the mountain. Scarlett has spent her whole life in the dark. What will happen when she emerges from the darkness? They gave Theodore quarters deep in the residential warren. A chamber with a bed grown from pale stone and a ceiling that glowed softly when you spoke to it and dimmed when you asked it, politely, to stop. Scarlett's rooms adjoined his, because protocol had bound them, and protocol did not believe in loose ends. There was a shared antechamber between the two doors, a small round space with a single vein of gold running up the center of the floor like a seam, and it was here, on the second night, that Theodore learned you could not have a private conversation in Echova if your life depended on it, which, though he didn't know it yet, it soon would. "Every word we say," he said, watching the seam brighten as he spoke, "goes somewhere, doesn't it? Everywhere." Scarlett sat across from him with her back against the curved wall, and the wall did not glow where she touched it, he'd noticed. Light came toward her, and then thought better of it. "Sound doesn't stop in Echova. It travels the veins. A shout in the upper city can be heard, faintly, in the deep chambers a day later, worn thin by the distance but still itself. The caverns remember everything they're told." She tilted her head. "It's why no one lies here. Or, everyone lies. But the lie glows a different color than the truth, and you learn to read the walls. A liar in Echova is just a person who hasn't noticed the room changing behind them. That's horrifying. That's honest." A pause. Those are frequently the same thing. He'd meant to keep it light. That had been the plan going in. Keep it breezy, keep the jokes flowing. Don't let the enormous, unresolved fact of a woman he technically owned settle into anything heavier than farce. But the caves undid the plan the way they undid everything, carrying his words further than he intended so that even a small question arrived somewhere deep and serious. He asked her where she was from and got a genealogy of exits. She'd been born in the deep chambers, she told him, in the cold, quiet places where her kind kept to themselves. Given away at 11 to settle a resonance debt. Given again at 19. Traded once, in the way you'd trade a debt you were embarrassed to still be carrying. Each time she'd learned a little more about how to be a gift, how to stand in the light, how to hold still, how to make the taking easy, because the taking happened whether you made it easy or not, and the easy way hurt less on the way down. "You're doing a thing with your face," she observed. "I'm not. You're doing the thing where a human feels sorry for someone and thinks he's hiding it." She nodded at the wall behind him. It had gone a low, warm, aching color. The gold deepened almost to amber, glowing in a slow pulse. "The wall's doing it for you. You're grieving out loud and you don't even know it. Stop. I don't want it." He looked at the wall. The wall had absolutely ratted him out. "Sorry," he said, and meant it. And the amber deepened, and he said, "Sorry." Again helplessly to the wall this time, which did not care. She almost smiled. The seam in the floor flickered, so he told her about himself instead, to give the wall something less pitying to broadcast. There wasn't much, and he said so. A small human life, a middling career, a posting to Echova that his superiors had described as a great honor in the tone people used for postings nobody else wanted. No family to speak of. He'd been chosen for this because he was expendable and cheerful, he explained, and those two qualities were rarer in combination than you'd think. The wall listened. It glowed a plain, even gold, while he talked, and he found he liked that, the honesty of it, the way the room simply reported him without weeping. "You're lonely," Scarlett said, reading the light. "The wall's a gossip. The wall's a mirror. You're lonely, and you've decided it's funny, which is a very human thing to do to a wound." She drew her knees up. "My people are blamed for this, you know. The dark. The dying." And she told him the thing the briefings had left out. The thing that turned the whole glowing city sideways in his head. That Echova was slowly going silent. At its center, in the deepest chamber, ran the heart song, the great resonance the entire city was tuned to, the note beneath all the other notes. It was fading, growing thin. And her kind, the pale ones, the ones the light shied from, the echo vampires, the crowd called them, because they were said to feed on resonance, to drink the living hum right out of the stone. Her kind were blamed, so her kind were given away, sung out of the city as honors to outsiders one at a time until there were almost none left, a gift and an exile in the same beautiful ceremony. "That's what you were, up there," Theodore said slowly. "The highest honor. You were them getting rid of one of the last of you." "Now you understand the joke," Scarlett said. "The city has a very good sense of humor. I told you." He didn't laugh, neither did she. But something moved between them in the quiet, wary, unnamed, charged, the particular electricity of two people recognizing in each other a shape they'd each thought was theirs alone. And they were arguing a moment later about nothing, about whether his refusal had made her life better or infinitely more complicated. And she was dry and cutting, and he was giving it right back, and at some point, she made the not-quite-laugh sound again and forgot to lock it away. The whole antechamber lit. Not one vein, all of them, every line in the little round room flaring gold at once, bright as held breath, the seam in the floor blazing between them like a struck match. Scarlett went still. She looked at the glowing walls, and then at Theodore, and the light was on her face now, warm on that impossible paleness, refusing for once to shy away. "Don't," she said quietly. "I'm not doing anything." "You are. So am I." She looked almost afraid, which he hadn't thought her capable of. And the walls can see it. Everything Echova believed about Scarlett's people has been turned upside down. They never consumed the heart song. Rather, they nourished it. Their own echoes kept the dying note of the entire city from falling into darkness. Each fated person sang as honor, causing silence to come faster. This means that each exile was a small, ceremonial act of self-destruction, and the city accompanied it. Scarlett always knew this halfway. In the next episode, Theodore presents her with the proof, and some truths are heavier to hold on to than to guess. The thing about being expendable and cheerful is that nobody watches you very closely, and Theodore had spent enough years being underestimated to know it was the closest thing to a superpower a middling man could get. So while the city assumed the confused envoy was sulking in his quarters over his refused gift, the confused envoy was, in fact, learning to sing. Badly. Let there be no confusion on that point. He could now reliably produce 3 of the 7 courtesy tones, and one that, if he wasn't careful, still came out as a question. But he discovered that the Hall of Records, a vast honeycomb chamber where the city's whole sung history was stored as living resonance in the stone, open to a chord even his clumsy human throat could approximate, if he was patient, and didn't mind the door treating each attempt like a mildly disappointing audition. On the 4th day, it sighed open. "Thank you," Theodore told it. "You're too kind. No, really, hold your applause." The records did not answer histories in words. They sang them, and he sat in the dark with the translator running hot, listening to centuries pour past him thin to whispers by the distance they'd traveled. He'd come looking for anything on the heart song, on the fading, on Scarlett's people. What he found took him 3 days to piece together, and 1 very bad hour to believe. It was in the old resonance maps. The city measured itself constantly, every chamber's tone logged, every vein's brightness charted, the whole mountain a living instrument that noted its own health, the way a heart notes its own beat. And the maps went back a long way. Far enough back that Theodore, cross-referencing brightness against population, against those quiet ceremonial exiles, watched a pattern surface out of the numbers, like something rising from deep water. Every time the pale ones were driven down into the deep chambers, the heart song grew stronger. Every time one was given away, it grew weaker, not by much each time. A thread, a hair. But the records were centuries deep, and the threads added up, and the shape they made was unmistakable, and it was the exact opposite of everything the city sang about itself. The echo vampires didn't drink the heart song. They were it, or part of it. The deep, sustaining part, the resonance the whole bright city was tuned to, without ever knowing whose throats it came from. They lived in the cold, quiet places and held the note up out of the dark, and Echova had looked at the people keeping it alive and decided they were the ones killing it. And then, gift by beautiful gift, sung them away. He found Scarlett in the antechamber. He'd meant to be gentle. He'd rehearsed gentle. What came out, because he was rattled and human and the walls were already glowing an anxious, preemptive gold around him, was, "I need to show you something, and it's going to make you want to set the entire city on fire." Which, fair. But let's talk logistics first. She looked at the records crystal he set spinning between them, listened to it sing its thin centuries, watched the little brightening graph the translator painted in the air. She listened to all of it without moving. The walls, which usually reported her nothing, began, very slowly, to darken. Not brighten. Darken. Around her the gold veins were dimming, drawing back, going cold, and Theodore understood he was watching a feeling too large and too old to glow. Some things didn't light up. Some things put the lights out. "I knew," she said finally. Barely a voice. "Not this. Not the—" She gestured at the graph, the arithmetic of it. "But I knew. We all knew. The way you know a thing you've decided is safer not to know. In the deep chambers, the old ones would sing to the stone at night. Long, low songs. For hours. I thought it was morning." The dark spread further from her, a slow tide of unlit gold. It wasn't morning. It was maintenance. They were holding it up. And every time the city gave one of us away, the ones left behind had to sing a little harder, into a little more silence, to cover the gap, until there weren't enough of us left to cover it at all. "Scarlett, I was given away 6 times. Her dark eyes came up to his, and they were not wet, which was somehow worse. 6 times I was the highest honor, and every single time I made the dying faster. I stood in that light and let them sing me out, and I helped kill the thing I was born to keep alive, and I thought I was just a debt being paid." The not-quite smile. Terrible now. The city really does have a very good sense of humor. It's been laughing at us for 400 years. Theodore, who did not have the right note for any of this in any language, said the only true thing he had. "It wasn't your fault. You were a child holding up a mountain, and they told you that you were the crack in it. The walls, at that, did something he'd never seen. A single vein near Scarlett flickered, not gold. For half a heartbeat it glowed a deep, impossible red, the red of the well finally giving back a little of the water it kept, and then it was gold again, and she'd looked away before she could see it. But he'd seen it, and he was still turning it over when the antechamber door sang open without either of them touching it, and the Master of Honors stood there with his lines gone hard, flickering amber, flanked by 2 others whose faces Theodore didn't know but whose expressions he did. He'd worn it himself, at the fountain that wasn't a fountain. It was the expression of people who had just realized you'd found the thing they'd very much hoped you wouldn't. "Envoy," the Master sang, and the translator gave it back cold and careful. "You've been in the records." "I've been in a lot of things," Theodore said, standing, putting himself half in front of the spinning crystal without quite deciding to. "Broom closets, fountains. It's been a whole tour." "You will give us the record," the Master sang, "and you will forget its song." And the walls all around them, reading the room, began quietly to glow the color of a lie about to be defended. To awaken the heart song, Scarlett must do what caused her people's exile, sing to stone with her whole being, in the place where they were banished, for a price she doesn't even want to name. And the final door opens only to a very specific tone. Not skill, not strength. Grief. Real grief. Theodore played every note wrong throughout the entire story. In the next episode, he finally plays one right, and it's not just any note. Theodore did the only sensible thing a cornered, unarmed, tone-deaf man could do when asked to surrender the truth. He threw the crystal to Scarlett and said, "Run toward the part of the city that scares them." And then he stepped directly into the path of the Master of Honors and began, loudly and terribly, to sing. It was not a good song. It was, in fact, all 4 of his reliable courtesy tones performed at once and out of order, which produced a sound so grammatically catastrophic that the 2 guards actually flinched, their glowing lines snarling into confused knots as their ears tried to parse a sentence that translated to roughly, "Hello, thank you, goodbye, I am a door." It bought 3 seconds. In a chase, 3 seconds is a lifetime, and Scarlett had already taken the crystal and gone, pale and swift, down, always down, toward the deep chambers, toward the cold, quiet places the city had spent 400 years emptying. He caught up to her in a tunnel where the veins ran thin and the light had the exhausted quality of a lamp left on too long. "Okay," he panted. "New question. When you say the deep chamber, and you say the heart song is dying, and you get that specific face, what exactly are you planning to do down there that you're not telling me? Because I've learned to read that face, and it's the face of a person doing math about herself." "The old ones held the note up by singing into the stone," Scarlett said, not slowing. "For hours. For years. There are almost none of us left to do it. But it can still be woken. The whole song restarted from the deep chamber, if someone sings into the heart song directly, with enough of themselves to catch it and pull it back up out of the silence. A beat. It's a great deal of resonance to give it once. The stone takes what you offer. It doesn't always check how much you can spare." "So it might." "It might," Scarlett agreed, pleasantly, in the tone of a woman confirming a lunch reservation. "I hate this plan. I want that documented. Whole documents, very underlined." "Noted, envoy." Behind them, the tunnels had begun to sing, a coordinated hunting harmony, the Master of Honors turning the city's own acoustics into a net, chords slamming doors shut ahead of them, resonance herding them toward dead ends. Theodore, who could open exactly one door on a good day, was of no use whatsoever, and said so, at length, while Scarlett found the tones that peeled the traps open one after another, her voice getting thinner each time she spent it. They went down through the emptied chambers of her people, past cold stone beds and dark, unglowing walls, past a whole civilization's worth of quiet the city had manufactured, and then blamed on the quiet ones. And at the bottom of everything, they reached the last door. It was black. Not stone black. Black, the absence at the center of the mountain, and it had no seam and no vein and no light. And it did not open to the chords Scarlett tried, one after another, her voice fraying now, ragged with the running and the giving. She tried the deep tones. She tried the old songs. The door held. "It won't," she said, and her legs went. And Theodore caught her, and she was cold, colder than a person should be. The giving already started somewhere he couldn't see. "It only opens to one thing," the old one said. "Not skill, not the right key. It opens to true grief, real grief, sung true. Because the deep chamber will only let in someone who's already lost enough to be trusted with it." A broken laugh. "And I can't. I've spent my whole life not feeling it. I made myself a gift. Gifts don't grieve. I locked it away so long I don't know where the door is anymore." The hunting harmony was close now. The walls above were bright with the lie the city was coming to defend. And Theodore, expendable, cheerful, tone-deaf Theodore, who had gotten every single note wrong since breakfast on his first day, knelt in the dark, holding a woman who had been given away 6 times and was about to give herself a 7th, and finally understood what the last door was asking for. It wasn't a note. It never had been. "Her name is Scarlett," he said, to the black door in flat, plain human words, and his voice cracked and he let it. "She was 11 the first time they gave her away. She held up a mountain and they called her the crack in it. 6 times they sang her out of the only home she had and told her it was an honor, and she learned to stand still and make the taking easy. And I have known her 4 days, and I cannot stand the thought of a city that would do that, and then ask her to die fixing it and still not say she's sorry." His throat closed. He pushed through it. "I refused an award and got a person, and somewhere in 4 days the worst planned week of my life became the only one I'd keep. And I am telling you, you black bastard of a door, that I grieve every version of her that had to survive being a gift. And if that's not true enough to open you, then nothing human ever will be." The walls went silent. The whole hunting harmony stopped, as if the mountain were listening. And the black door, which answered only to grief, sung true, heard a human tell the truth so plainly it had nowhere else to hide, and understood at last that a thing said honestly is only a tone the caverns had never been sung before. It opened. Light poured up from below, deep and red and alive, the color of the well giving back its water. Scarlett stared at him. The door's glow warm on her impossible paleness, 400 years of locked grief finally cracking loose behind her dark eyes, and the tears came, and where they fell the black stone bloomed gold. "You got one right," she whispered. "Give me time," Theodore said. "I'll ruin it." They went down into the heart song together. The heart song awakens. The exiled are called home, and the authorities who plunged an entire people into darkness are defeated by the only weapon they built, a city that can finally hear its own lies glinting against its walls. But the real ending is quieter. For the first time in her life, Scarlett is offered a choice instead of a destination. Theodore never asked for a reward. He wanted her to be free to leave. Whether she stays or goes is the question. Come and find out. The deep chamber was not what Theodore expected, which by this point should not have surprised him, since nothing on this planet had been what he expected, including the fountains, the doors, the woman, and, increasingly, himself. He'd imagined something vast and dramatic. Instead, the heart song lived in a small, round room at the very bottom of the world, no bigger than his quarters, its walls threaded so densely with veins that the stone itself was more light than dark. And in the center, faint, guttering, was the note. He couldn't hear it so much as feel it, a low thread of resonance so worn and thin it was nearly gone, the pulse of a city about to flatline politely without ever mentioning it was unwell. "That's it?" he said. "That's the thing holding up the whole mountain?" "Big things," Scarlett said, "are usually held up by small ones that never get thanked." She was already moving toward the center, and the giving cold was in her again, and Theodore caught her wrist. "There has to be another way that isn't you spending yourself to nothing on a city that exiled you." "There isn't." She looked at his hand on her wrist, then at him. "But there's a difference this time, envoy. Every other time I gave, it was taken. This time I'm choosing it. That's not nothing. That's the only thing I've ever gotten to keep." A pause, and the not-quite smile, softer now. "Also, you're going to help, because you found the records, and a lie glows a different color than the truth, and the whole city is about to be very interested in which is which." That was the plan, such as it was. She would sing into the heart song. He would hold the truth up where the city couldn't look away, and the caverns, which carried every sound to everyone eventually, would do the rest. She sang. It was not like the ceremony. It was not beautiful in the tidy way the honors had been beautiful. It was a raw, deep, pouring song, 400 years of held grief finally given somewhere to go, and Theodore watched the pale of her go paler as the stone drank it, watched the red veins bloom brighter as the guttering thread of the heart song caught, steadied, rose. And he did his part. He set the record's crystal spinning and let it sing its centuries into the rising resonance, and the caverns took the truth and carried it up through the deep chambers, up the thin tunnels, up into the bright upper city where the Master of Honors and his people were still hunting shadows, and everywhere the truth passed. The walls changed color. The maps, the arithmetic, the pale ones holding up the note, the exile dressed as honor. 400 years of it, glowing the plain even gold of a thing that is simply, undeniably true, on every wall in Echova at once, in a language no one could pretend not to read. You cannot defend a lie in a city that has just been shown, on its own stone, exactly what it did. The hunting harmony faltered, fell apart. Somewhere far above, the Master of Honor sang a last desperate discord, and the walls around him glowed the ugly, stuttering color of a liar who has finally noticed the room changing behind him. And this time everyone was watching the room. It was not a battle. It was a city, standing very still, listening to itself, and being unable at last to sing along with its own comfortable song. And the heart song woke, It came up out of the silence like sunrise made of sound, a great low note swelling through the mountain until every vein in every chamber blazed at once, gold and red and gold, the whole hollow city ringing like a struck bell. Theodore felt it in his sternum, in his teeth, in the small, unimpressive human heart he'd assumed nobody would ever tune anything to. Scarlett swayed, spent to the edge of herself, but the stone, catching, singing now on its own, gave back. The red veins reached toward her the way light had shied from her for 400 years, and this time they did not shy. They warmed her. The city, waking, chose not to take the last of the one who'd woken it. She lived. That, Theodore would say later, was the only miracle he'd actually prayed for, and he wasn't a praying man. What followed took weeks, and most of it was paperwork, which he found bleakly hilarious. That you could topple 4 centuries of injustice with a spinning crystal and a city's own acoustics and still end up sitting in meetings. The exiled were called home. The deep chambers filled again with the pale ones the light no longer fled from. The master of honors and those who'd profited from the exiles were not exiled in turn. Echova had learned at last what exile cost, but were made to stand in the hall while the walls sang what they'd done, which was, in a city where feeling glowed, a punishment sharper than any dark. Theodore's superiors sent a commendation for exceptional diplomatic outcomes, having no idea what he'd actually done and choosing, in the finest tradition of his profession, to pretend they'd meant for him to do it. And then, on a quiet evening in the antechamber, where a seam of gold ran up the floor, Theodore did the last thing the story needed him to do. "You're free," he told her. "Not held, not owed, not resolved by protocol. The whole thing's dissolved. I checked, there were documents, I underlined them. You can go anywhere. You don't owe this city, and you certainly don't owe me." He made himself say the hard part. "I never wanted an award, Scarlett. I wanted you to be able to walk out that door because you chose to. So, there's the door. It'll even open to your tone." She looked at him a long moment. The walls around them held their breath, unlit, waiting. "You get everything wrong," she said, "historically. You've spent this whole time refusing to keep me." She stepped closer, and where she passed, the veins did not shy. They warmed, gold rising to meet her, a city that had finally learned which of its people were the light. It never once occurred to you that a person might refuse to leave. That wasn't in the briefing. "No," Scarlett said. "I don't imagine it was." And she stayed. Not given, not taken, not the last honor sung in anyone's hall, but a woman who had been offered, for the first time in her life, an open door, and had looked through it, and decided the thing on this side was worth choosing. The antechamber lit around them both, every vein at once, warm and gold and unashamed. The walls of Echova glowing not because they'd caught something hidden, but because for once there was nothing left to hide. The city, it turned out, did have a sense of humor. It had simply, at long last, learned to laugh with them instead. We've reached the end of another story, friends. What struck me most about this story is the inherent rejection. Theodore never tried to hold on to Scarlett. Throughout the story, he tried to give her back to him, to keep the door open instead of holding her. And that was the only thing no one else ever did for him. Sometimes the deepest way to hold someone is to allow them to walk away freely and then trust that they will choose to stay. That's what I'm curious about, and I'd love to hear your opinions. If you had spent your whole life surrendering to people, could you trust the person who finally set you free? Could you trust an open door? Or would you just keep the walls dark for safety? Let's meet in the comments. If you enjoyed the story, please click the like button, and if you want to travel with me again, subscribe to Sci-Fi Traveler. There's always another world waiting for you. Until then, take care of each other and don't be afraid to let the walls shine. See you in the next story, friends.